Welcome back to another FPL video. Today I'll be rating your teams for the first time in a very long while, and because there were so many submissions, I might spread this across two different parts and try to cover basically every single comment, message on Twitter, Instagram, the Discord server, the YouTube comment section, which included a team ID. And in order to do that, I have to spread this across two different parts. So if this video gets to over 300 likes, there will definitely be a part 2 where I rate more of your FPL teams. But you won't be able to make new submissions if you comment on this video of your team ID, because we've already got a list of over 30, and unfortunately it won't be able to, cover any new ones as well. But in the future, if you subscribe to the channel, you will see a post on the community section of YouTube, and also if you watch any of my videos, I'll talk about it in the intro, and I will let you guys know that I'm also accepting submissions and that you can put the team ID in the YouTube comment section and all over my social media platforms. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and also to watch them, of course, from time to time, and you will be able to find out when I'm doing one of these rating your teams videos. But we're going through so many today. On screen, you can see my team selection. There will be a final team selection video later this week where I discuss some possible transfers as well, not just for Game Week 9, but also Game Week 10. But let's get straight into this one where I rate your FPL teams, give you some suggestions, and try to help you build a great FPL squad. The first of 14 FPL squads covered today is sent in by Lage, a long-time viewer of the channel and a moderator as well in the live stream, so big up to Lage. He says, my plan for Game Week 9 is to roll, and after that I am clueless for now. Trust me, you're not the only one who has such a thought process at the moment, and this is what I would do maybe in Game Week 10, of course, because your team is in good shape, but I would look to make the following moves. Neto and Heung-min Son to Matoma and Bowen in Game Week 10. And with these extra funds in the future, you can also upgrade Lamptey to Gabriel, Saliba, Joachim Andersen, and perhaps Sven Botman in future game weeks. Now, it might seem a bit, counterintuitive to sell the likes of Heung-min Son, and even Pedro Neto is a good budget option, but I think that combination of Matoma and Bowen, as well as another good option on your bench, because I think Taylor, Mabama, and Lamptey is very lacking, and you don't have a lot of squad depth, if any at all. I think that would be a really good way of countering that, adding a bit of squad depth there. You have a good option on your bench if you ever need it, especially in situations like this where you have free flag players. So that's what I look to do in Game Week 10, Lage. Let me know what you think down in the comment section as well. But I would consider Neto and Heung-min Son to Matoma and Bowen, and then use the extra funds to upgrade one bench player, and you could maybe do Lamptey in this instance to a Gabriel, Saliba, Botman, or Joachim Andersen. The second team is sent in by Tony Gama, and he says, Hola amigo, and thank you for all your work. I haven't used my wildcard yet. I have one transfer available and was thinking to move Estupiñán to Gabriel, which leaves me with 0.8 million. Then next week, Eze to someone like March, because I like Brighton's fixtures. Any advice or thoughts would be great. So thank you for sending in your team, Tony. And one thing I would consider in Game Week 10, and it's building upon what you were laying out in your message, is to do Colwill and Eze to Gabriel and Solly March. Now, my issue with Brighton assets in general is rotation, especially with the Europa League this year. And towards the back end of last season, Solly March was being benched quite heavily by Roberto De Zerbi, and the only nailed-on Brighton asset, in my opinion, is Matoma and Estupiñán. And once Estupiñán returns from injury, you can keep him, reintroduce him into your team in Game Weeks 10 or 11, depending on when he returns. And you can also triple up on Brighton if you really want that third player, but you could also consider going elsewhere, even to a Pedro Neto and Anthony Gordon. You've got a few other options around 6.2 million and below, so you don't necessarily need to go for Solly March, but because you made the point of that, and you want another player from Brighton, then Solly March is probably what I'd go to, but I don't think he's an essential buy, and there are definitely some good alternatives elsewhere for a similar price. And in terms of the captaincy, by the way, my feeling is it's between Haaland and Salah in terms of the two best captaincy options, but according to FPL.team, Salah has the highest expected points, and that's why he's got the armband in all of the teams you'll see that includes Salah. So that's why you will see that in my own team selection. I will discuss this as well. In the first one, I did have the captaincy on Haaland, but that could definitely change by the time I get to the final team selection video and the deadline stream. So it's another very solid squad, very good expected points by FPL.team. Your squad is in very good shape, but I think if you were looking to make some moves, I think Colwill out for maybe someone like Gabriel could definitely be on the cards, and then you can also bring Solly March for the injured Eze. The next team is sent in by Raph, and he says, I'm going to take Morris out this game week to free up money and I've already used the wild card, but my targets are to bring Matoma in for Game Week 10 and get an Arsenal defender in. I might also look at a differential in Darwin Núñez or Luis Diaz. So thank you for your submission as well. And building upon what you're saying in, your transfer plans, I think this is what I do. So maybe Morris to a budget striker is on the cards this week. You could go to Cameron Archer, who's probably the best one at 4.5 million and below. And with those funds, you could also do Gordon to Matoma. Now, you kept Gordon through his suspension when he had the 5 yellow cards and didn't play in Game Week 8. And now he's back and he's got some good long-term fixtures. But if you really want a Brighton player, I think Matoma is the best asset alongside Estupiñán once he returns from injury. And I wouldn't sell Bowen, Salah, Diaby or Son. And if I had to pick one midfielder, it would be Gordon to offload, but I can understand if you aren't really too, optimistic about such a transfer. And then from Game Week 12 onwards, I would buy Gabriel for Kabore, as it's not worth a hit to make all these transfers in Game Week 10. And I also would look at maybe upgrading Zuma. I don't think you need to have him necessarily. And if you want that 3.9 million defender in Kabore as your 5th choice, then you could sell Zuma to Gabriel instead and have even more money left in the bank. And in terms of the Núñez and Luis Diaz kind of maybe differential, I wouldn't go for it this week considering what happened last time. The Liverpool South American players came back from international duty. They were all benched with the exception of McAllister, who only played around 50 minutes and was subbed out. And the early kickoff versus Everton makes both picks extremely risky. And I actually think Jota will start and he could be a great differential for 1 week. But in the long term, I agree with you. Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez are good options. But for Game Week 9, I'd probably avoid both because it's a really good chance that both of them are benched for that Merseyside derby. The 4th team cover today is by Erik Jaala, a YouTube channel member, and he says I wildcarded in Game Week 7. So if we actually go towards Game Week 10, which is where we make the bulk of these FPL transfers, I would look to do Rashford and Dalot out to Saka and Estupiñán if he's fit for Game Week 10. There is a possibility he's back in Game Week 11 instead, and if there's a setback, it could be even later than that. And in terms of future moves as well, I would look to downgrade Awini to Archer or another 4.4 million forward and use those extra funds for other moves you may wish to do as well. It could also be crucial if you want to buy Erling Haaland back for Game Week 11 or perhaps later on in the season around Game Week 16 when the fixtures turn for Manchester City. So I think that's what I would do in your team. I would get rid of the Man United players. I'd keep the differentials like Darwin, who could be benched in Game Week 9, by the way. And you've already got Salah. You've got a very good foundation. Kieran Trippier and Heung-min Son as well. That midfield 5 looks extremely solid. But in the future, if you also want to get Erling Haaland back in, it might require downgrading Awini, also Heung-min Son to a budget midfielder, and then upgrading one of your forwards to the Norwegian robot. On screen, you can see Wai Tseng's team, a moderator of the channel and also very helpful in the Discord server. He says his transfer plans are to roll in Game Week 9 and to do Steele and Mbumo to Johnston and Gordon in Game Week 10. No idea what to do afterwards. All chips are available. So if you go to Game Week 10 and building upon what you're saying with your transfer plans, I think your plans are very solid. And you can also consider buying Areola instead of Johnston if you need the extra 0.3 million in funds. And also you get a better Game Week 10 fixture because Johnston does play Tottenham at home. I would also look to buy Saka and Gabriel for Son and Gvardiol in future game weeks, and it's all about priority. If you want to keep Heung-min Son and you're happy to go about Saka against Sheffield United and Burnley in the upcoming game weeks, you could focus your efforts on a defender transfer instead and sell Gvardiol, who has some very poor fixtures up until game week 16, and go for Gabriel, Saliba, or maybe even double up on Newcastle defensively. But I would go for an Arsenal defender in this instance, and I think that will be the priority. Afterwards, you could focus on Heung-min Son out to Bukayo Saka. So let me know your thoughts as well, Wai Tseng. Your transfer plans are already solid. You can go for Areola instead of Johnston for 0.3 million in terms of extra funds. You can also bring in Arsenal players in the future, or even downgrade a Gvardiol or another player in your 15-man squad, just so you have fewer benching dilemmas every single week. If you're happy with the squad depth and the way your team is structured, then you can carry on, but I would consider that as well, just so you can have even more funds for future moves to upgrade the starting 11 and also to remove some benching headaches in the future. Number 6 is John Granquist, the longest standing channel member on YouTube. So big up to John. He says, Dylan, thanks for your hard work on the channel. Slow start. Had Salah all along, so still have the wild card. Saka coming back in for Son or Rashford in Game Week 10. Alex Moreno danger with Dean, but lucky so far. Please advise. Thank you, John. So big up to John, of course. Now, if you go to Game Week 10, these are the transfers I'd be looking to do. You were saying, should I sell Son or Rashford to Bukayo Saka? I think the answer is very simple. I would keep Heung-min Son and sell Rashford in Game Week 10 for Bukayo Saka, and I'd also look to bring in Areola for Flecken in the same game week, but of course you don't necessarily need to. You could play Turner, but he is away to Liverpool, and of course Flecken could be out for several weeks, maybe even months due to illness. I would also sell Bruno Fernandes to Bowen or Matoma in the future. You could even take a -4 hit and make all of these transfers possible in Game Week 10, but if you want to keep Bruno Fernandes for Man City at home, he did score in this fixture last season, then you could save that transfer for Game Week 11 or 12, of course, depending on the way you want to prioritize your transfers and if you want to take a risk with the hit or if you back Man United against Man City in Game Week 10. So let me know your thoughts, John, but I think I would do Rashford and Flecken to Saka and Areola in Game Week 10 and possibly take a -4 hit to sell Bruno Fernandes to Bowen or Matoma. Numero 7 is Sudhyindra, and he says, planning on wildcarding in Game Week 10, thoughts Dylan? And my suggestion and my thinking is that a wildcard in Game Week 10 could definitely be key in redistributing funds. And I look at your squad, players like Edison, Sterling, Baldock, Rashford and Mbeumo are all sells in the long term. And I would consider using the wildcard, not even just in Game Week 10, but possibly in Game Week 9 as well. This would allow you to bring in Salah versus Everton, buy Watkins, especially ahead of those great fixtures like Luton Town coming up very soon. You can also bring in Matoma and other key assets, and you're all ready and prepared for that fixture swing from Game Week 10 onwards. Now, of course, you can just wait with the wild card and do it in Game Week 10, but you could also do it a week early, build a bit more of team value, and also not miss out on some great assets like Watkins and particularly Mohamed Salah in that early kickoff. If you want to keep Rashford and Mbeumo for this week, then you could just do a punt, for example, for 1 week, such as Gordon or Neto, by selling Sterling and benching Bowen to avoid a fixture clash with Matty Cash, of course, since you have Jared Bowen and Matty Cash. So I think my suggestion here is to either wildcard in Game Week 9 or 10, and if you decide to hold off for 1 more week, then I would go for a 1 week punt like a Gordon or Neto and then bench Jared Bowen, and I think your squad will look in really good shape for Game Week 9. Another Game Week 7 wildcarder is Arnold Desiri 5564, and he says punted on Darwin instead of Watkins, which didn't work. I have 2 free transfers and 0.9 million in the bank. All depends on early leaks, but probably getting Watkins for Darwin right before the deadline. And then Bowen and Saka, or another Arsenal midfielder, for Foden and Bruno in Game Week 10. So if we head over to the famous old Game Week 10, my transfer suggestions are, I agree with your plans and believe they are sound. As good as Darwin's potential is, there is a chance of Jota starting in his place in the early kickoff, and I think that will be the case. Watkins also has plum fixtures coming up, and his consistency has been unmatched so far this season. Martinelli and Odegaard are good considerations, but for me, Saka is the clear victor when it comes to Arsenal assets in the midfield. If you still have the funds, you could do Zuma to Gabriel / Botman, maybe Burn, Gay, Mitchell. Any of those assets will be very good acquisitions to your team, and that could also be another upgrade you could consider in the future. On screen you can see here it says -4 hit and it says free transfers, but you don't need to make all of those transfers at the same time, of course. And by the way, the reason why it is like that is because I wanted to show his original team in Game Week 9, but ultimately what you're doing, since you have 2 free transfers this week, is Darwin to Watkins in Game Week 9, and then in Game Week 10 you can make the other 2 transfers and basically do what you were saying there and get him an Arsenal midfielder for Foden and Bruno, and I think your team would be in very good shape from Game Week 10 onwards. So don't take a -4 hit and do all transfers in Game Week 10. I would go ahead with the Watkins transfer in Game Week 9 just before the deadline. Of course, if Darwin starts, you could delay that move by another game week. And then in Game Week 10, I would bring in Bowen and Saka for Phil Foden and Bruno Fernandes. This is Lars Foreign, 3282's team. He says, I use the wildcard in Game Week 2 as I've never played the game before and not followed the Premier League for over 10 years. Doesn't seem like that to me. Planning to do Edison to Areola, Luis Diaz to an Arsenal midfielder, and Rico Henry to an Arsenal defender. So really good transfer plans. As many of you are watching, you will also have good transfer plans and those that send in their teams. So for me, Saka has to be the Arsenal midfielder of choice once he returns from injury, which is likely going to be in Game Week 9, according to some reports. And in terms of Arsenal defenders, I think Gabriel, Saliba and Wai are the best, and probably in that order. In terms of value, I think Gabriel edges it, then it's Saliba, and then it's Ben White. You can buy an Arsenal defender from Game Week 12 onwards and focus on Areola and Saka first. So I think that's what I would do. So just to recap, I would be looking to sell Turner and potentially Luis Diaz, and I would go to Bukayo Saka and Areola, and you also have 1.1 million in the bank for future moves, and that could also include Rico Henry to Gabriel, and you could also sell the likes of Diogo Dalot. And as much as I like Haaland, I'm still not convinced by him as an FPL asset, and you could keep him for Sheffield United, of course, but afterwards I would maybe look to sell in a game week such as Game Week 10. But of course, United's fixtures are still pretty good in the short to medium term, so he's not a priority sell, so to speak. And I think with those transfer plans, your team will be in very good shape and you can deal with the fixture swings very efficiently. The 10th team covered today is by Simon Warne, and he says, "Hi Dylan, I activated the wildcard in Game Week 8 and I'm planning to bring in Saka for Son and hopefully a Brighton player, although I'm not sure who to transfer out as I like my team for the upcoming game weeks. Keep up the good work." Thank you very much to Simon. And if you go to Game Week 10, once again, my key suggestion is Son to Saka is a popular move for a reason. Despite how good Brighton's fixtures are, it's not worth selling any of these midfielders, in my opinion, to Mitoma in Game Week 10. Otherwise, you could be forcing it, like in an early example where I said I would maybe sell Gordon to Mitoma. It's a similar scenario here. But when you look at these 5 midfielders, I mean, would you sell Diaby when he faces Luton Town at home in Game Week 10? Bukayo Saka is a great transfer in. Then you've got Salah, Bowen, Maddison. I just don't think it's worth it to force Mitoma in. But if you were to sell one of these 5 midfielders, it probably would be Diaby, but I would only do so after he faces Luton Town at home, at least in Game Week 10. You could also consider Diaby to Mitoma in Game Week 13 if you want to pinpoint a particular game week to make such a move, or maybe Game Week 15, and that's when the fixtures swing for Aston Villa. They do have Bournemouth in between those 2 game weeks in Game Week 14. And if you want a Brighton player even earlier, then you could do Joachim Andersen to Estupinian, but that's assuming he's fit, of course, by Game Week 10 or 11. So those would be the transfer plans. Saka in for Son, I think, is a good transfer from Game Week 10 onwards, and then you can bring in Estupinian for Joachim Andersen very soon if the Ecuadorian is back, and if not, you could bring in Mitoma for Diaby around Game Week 13 or 15. Here we have Black Machine's team, and he says, "I wildcarded in Game Week 3 after a bad start. It's my first season playing from the start, and I'm inside the top 50k with no Haaland." There you go. And my suggestion here is, look, you've got a lot of flag players, and that could definitely be a bit problematic or concerning. But if we actually break it down, the likes of Saka, Isak and Botman are all expected to be available for Game Week 9, so I wouldn't worry about them too much. So really, you've got Flecken, who could be a long-term concern, and Awani. And if this is the case, and Botman, Saka and Isak are all fit, these are the sorts of transfers I'd be looking to make. And by the way, once again, this doesn't have to be in particular in Game Week 10. It could be spread across, multiple game weeks. So you can make one transfer in Game Week 9, maybe one in Game Week 10, and then also in the future. So Awani to Watkins could be a great transfer here. You could also do Flecken to Areola, and also Aurier to Gabriel, Estupinian or Saliba, and you would have enough funds in order to make all of these moves, since you already had around 3 million in the bank. And in the future, you could also downgrade Solanke to a 4.5 million forward if you want to change your team structure or redistribute the funds. And this could also be crucial in buying back an Erling Haaland, maybe around Game Week 11 or in Game Week 16. So you've got plenty of flexibility with this 50-man squad. But ultimately, Awani to Watkins is a great upgrade. Flecken to Areola is also very sound, especially because Vicario is already priced at around 5 million. And then Aurier to an Arsenal defender, or even a Estupinian, could be a great defender transfer for you. So let me know your thoughts, Black Machine. Of course, a very early wild card, but your team is still in good shape. And of course, there's a lot of flags, but I wouldn't be too concerned. And if Botman, Saka and Isak are all available, you could do really well in Game Week 9. I'm quite surprised actually, because a lot of people who have submitted their teams have wildcarded extremely early, and Hero Tex Ghouls Us, I think that's how you say it. Apologies if I said it wrong. He says, I wildcarded in Game Week 4. Thank you, man. Cheers. So thank you. And another early wildcard to dissect. So we go to Game Week 10, and my suggestion is you have a solid foundation, but also a lot of benching headaches every single week. I would potentially downgrade 1 or 2 players on your bench, which could help you buy Salah soon. So what you could consider is Alvarez or Isak to Mabama. And my issue with Isak is the constant rotation between him and Callum Wilson. Then you could do Sterling to Salah, Mbeumo to Gordon or Neto, and Edison to Areola. I do recognise it's a lot of transfers, and as you can see on screen, that would be a -8 hit if you do these transfers in Game Weeks 9 and 10. I wouldn't do that necessarily. I would spread these around across multiple game weeks, and you could focus on prioritising instead. So I think Sterling to Salah is a massive upgrade, but you can only do that by making the other 3 transfers, and that's going to be really, really heavy for you. So look, a -4 hit wouldn't be too bad. Even a -8 hit long term could pay off, but I would be a bit careful about that, and I don't think your team necessarily needs such a big hit there as well. But these are some transfer suggestions for you, and you would have 0.1 to 0.2 million in the bank with these moves. So with a bit of luck, you can spread these transfers around across the next 2 to 4 game weeks, but I do recognize it is pushing it, and I want to see what you're kind of thinking as well in terms of your transfer suggestions and moves you're looking to make. And you don't need to bring in Salah. He's not absolutely essential, but he is one of the best options across the next 5 to 10 game weeks in my opinion. So if you can find a way to bring him in, I think this could be a really good way of doing it. And I know it's a lot of transfers, it's a lot of hits, but ultimately I think it could be worth it even. So if you are prepared to take a -4 or -8 hit, you could even go ahead and do all of these moves around Game Week 10. Hopefully this is an unlucky 13, but RadDog27 is up next, and he says, hey mate, I use my wildcard in Game Week 8. Transfer plans, I'm going to be Darwin to Alvarez if we get a leak that Darwin isn't playing, and this could also help cover no Haaland. Then I'm thinking of Maddison or Son to Saka or Martinelli in Game Week 10. Let me know what you think. Thanks. So if we actually break this down, I think Alvarez is a better option compared to Darwin Nunez, and he's also more likely to start in Game Week 9, but there is still a risk of rotation for the Argentine because Argentina play away in Lima, in Peru, at 3 a.m. in the morning on Wednesday, and there's not much recovery time between that and when Man City play. Of course, it's even worse for Liverpool, who have the early kickoff on Saturday, but I still think Alvarez isn't a guarantee to play also against Brighton or to start the match, but I think he will start. And in terms of the Argentina lineup, that could also have a bit of an influence. And the rumour is that 2 or 3 of Messi, Lautaro Martinez and Alvarez will start. And if you're asking me, I think Alvarez will get the nod. But maybe Pep Guardiola will have a conversation with Scaloni and they'll say, look, come on, manage his minutes, we need him for the weekend, and that could also play a part. You just never know what goes on behind the scenes, but I personally think Alvarez is still more likely to play in Game Week 9 compared to Darwin Nunez, or at least start the game from the beginning. And also in terms of other moves you could consider, Son to Saka would be my preferred move in terms of those Spurs to Arsenal midfielders you are considering. I would keep Maddison, and I don't think Maddison to Martinelli is a better transfer compared to Son to Saka, but of course you could disagree. My only concern with Maddison is his injury record, and he hasn't returned yet at home in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but away from home he has been impeccable and probably the best FPL asset on his travels. So those would be my suggestions there. I'd go for Son to Saka, and ultimately I would do Darwin Nunez to Alvarez, but it's all a matter of timing, and of course we could get early leaks in the deadline stream, and if Darwin Nunez starts, I would definitely keep him and avoid the Alvarez move for a little while longer. The final team cover today is by Phillips Stan, and he says, great video Dylan, wildcard used, 1 free transfer, 0 million in the bank. And it might seem a bit boring, and a lot of teams will have this similar suggestion, but Son to Saka in Game Week 10 is my preference, and I would also consider Flecking to Johnston or Turner if the Brentford goalkeeper is out for several weeks due to illness. So keep an eye out on the Flecking situation, and even if he is back, you've got so many injury problems at Brentford with Rico Henry missing the entire season due to an ACL injury. Ben Mee is still out. So Brentford are struggling. Even the absence of Ivan Toney up front has been detrimental ultimately. So I think Flecking being downgraded to a Turner could be the right call, but even moving him to Johnston is a really good way of covering Crystal Palace defensively. And to be fair, you've already got Mark Gay. So I think maybe I would go to Turner if I had to pick between those 2 goalkeepers, and then Saka in for Heung-min Son. And you would also have plenty of money in the bank. So if you actually do this very quickly, so Turner in, you would have 1.1 million in the bank, and that could be very crucial for any future moves you may consider. So those are the 14 teams we've covered today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you agree with my feedback? Is there something you disagreed with? Any constructive criticism you can give to any of the people who are featured in this video? And maybe you have a similar situation yourself and this video may have helped you. If that's the case, smash the like button and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this video to the 300 likes and also to get ever closer towards 21,000 subscribers and beyond. We're around 70 away from that milestone. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon and channel memberships, so you can also see all of my videos with early access, have exclusive badges to use in videos and live streams, and also get access to all my team reveals for UCL Fantasy and FPL. There's also the Twitter and Instagram where you can talk to me there and also follow for any updates, the Discord server to be part of a great community there, and also the FPL League where we have thousands of members and we're looking to grow that even more. We also have the biggest UCL Fantasy League in the world, I believe, so it's all very much appreciated. I'll see you very soon for the Game Week 9 deadline stream. There's also going to be the Matchday 3 deadline stream for UCL Fantasy, and a lot of content headed your way for both fantasy formats, and I'll see you next time.